All right, welcome back. So today's just going to be a little bit of a mini lesson. We know we've been speaking and discussing Columbus for the past really about week and a half, 2 weeks. Today we're going to answer kind of an age-old question. You can kind of see from the title behind me, but let's go ahead and jump into it. So the question that we have, or that we're going to attempt to answer today, is why isn't America named after Columbus? If Columbus is the one that discovered this, new world, why is it named after him? I want to take a look at this map real quick. I really like this map a lot. We're gonna move me right there. So, looking at this map, one of the first things that jumps out to me is this right here, West Indies. West Indies. Again, Columbus thought he was traveling to the Indies. Now, there would not be at this time an East Indies and a West Indies. It would only be the Indies. Because he ends up somewhere different than he thinks he is, now, and he has called this area the Indies, now we have both East and West, with the West being essentially the Bahamas, Haiti, Dominican Republic, Cuba, these islands in the Caribbean. Now, going from there, we see just some basic, North America, South America geography. Okay, one thing I want us to remember is that our country. If you don't know where our country is, it's right up here. There's Florida. You go up into Georgia, into South Carolina. I guess I kind of cut off North Carolina. But anyways, our country is not named America. And I know one. It's kind of a silly thing to say. Two, it's also something that kind of sounds weird when you hear it. But our country is not called America. Our country is called the United States. 50 of them of America. And so when we're talking about the of part, that last, the A in the USA is of America. And we're essentially talking about one whole side of the world, the Americas, that we have separated into both North America consists of the United States, Canada, which is above us, Mexico, and then this area of 7 countries that we call Central America. Central America starts at Guatemala, runs from Belize, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and then Panama. And then once you pass Panama, you get to South America. And look at that first country in South America. It's named Colombia. Guess who that is named after? Christopher Columbus. Now, so with all that being said, again, why isn't this called North Columbia and South Columbia? And why aren't we the USC? USC, the United States of Colombia? Well, we're going to attempt to answer that question in this presentation. All right, let's go ahead and move me back again. Oh, yeah, there's Bermuda. I don't know if any of you guys are into the whole Bermuda Triangle, but it's interesting. And sometimes we kind of forget where these places are. We just hear about them. All right. So, who was Amerigo Vespucci? So, why isn't the United States of America? Why isn't both these continents named after Columbus? Well, it has to do with this man right here, Amerigo Vespucci. So Amerigo Vespucci was a merchant, and when we're talking about merchant, we're talking about trade. So that's what he used his ships for. Like he would sell goods, from Spain or Italy, I guess, being more so where he was doing most of his business, but he would sell like through the Mediterranean, again, trading goods. That was how he made his money. He was a merchant. But he would later become an explorer that would shed new light on the discoveries of Columbus. Again, where does Columbus think he is? He thinks he is in the Indies. He thinks that he is sailing through, the islands surrounding Japan and China, when in reality he is not. And, what's funny is I've had this question asked. It's like, how didn't Columbus know he wasn't somewhere else? How did Columbus know he wasn't in Asia? Well, you can look at this many different ways. Think about it this way: if I asked you to map out I asked you to map out the area of Ashboro, and you had never seen it like on a map before, and you just had to kind of draw where you think Ashboro is on a map. You got to think these people, these explorers, these map makers, and these navigators, they had all mapped out the world without seeing it from above. I want you to think about that. They had mapped out the world by even though they could not see it from above. So, we look at maps from, the 1400s, 1500s, before that, and we see you see something that does not look anything, well, I shouldn't say it doesn't look anything, but you see maps that look very different from ours today. But it's not until much later that we actually get into the air to look down upon the earth and see, okay, so while today our maps are, pretty very accurate, even back then, like they're doing a pretty good job. Like they're not idiots. They're not idiots. But again, if you don't know that there is this large landmass in between the Europeans and the Asians, then where are you supposed to think you are? But Amerigo Vespucci will help again kind of put these discoveries of Columbus in context. What's interesting is that Columbus and Vespucci actually met, and Vespucci was essentially influenced by Columbus to begin exploring. So Columbus, he came back to Spain between his second and third voyages, again, needing help establishing a colony. And it was actually during this time. This is somewhere in the mid 1490s, looking more so, I guess, 1495, I believe. Columbus and Vespucci get to talking, and not anything more than just some casual conversation. Columbus was a hero, you know what I mean? Like Columbus was a big deal in Spain, especially after his first voyage. Now, obviously, there would be problems, more and more problems as it came to Columbus and his governorship of Hispaniola and these islands that he had, for lack of a better word, discovered. But Vespucci is asking him just questions about what he is seeing, questions about one of the big things for Vespucci is questions about like gold and money that he can make. And so Vespucci, after this meeting with Columbus, he decides that he's going to give up his merchant life and he's going to go out and seek some real money. Again, going on these like voyages with Columbus or going on these voyages, these expeditions along, with Columbus while Columbus is doing it at the same time. This is, again, mostly about making money. There's resources, there's gold, there's valuables. Some countries are participating in slavery. So there are, again, you hate to say it like that, but that is the way that it was looked upon, as there was, money-making endeavors there. So Amerigo Vespucci, he would sail on behalf of Spain. So again, Spain wants to be this leader in innovation, this leader in exploration. He would sail on behalf of Spain in 1499 to the lands that Columbus had described as being part of the Indies. There's a lot of dispute about the exact route that he took, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. But Vespucci, a little bit later, a couple of years later, he would actually sail back to the Indies, but instead he would be under the flag of Portugal, because if you remember, Portugal was the ones that were really kind of setting the tone for this series of exploration. And it was Portugal that had successfully sailed around the Horn of Africa to India, to Asia. And now Spain, again, trying to take some of that clout, Spain trying to beat them to Asia by taking a new route, a faster route, but Portugal is not going to be outdone. Not going to be outdone, and it is under this voyage of Portugal Vespucci, this under this voyage of Portugal, that he would make his greatest discovery. And we're going to look at that next. Give me 1 second. I got to plug my computer in. I didn't realize it was about to die. I don't want to mess this up. All right, so what did Vespucci discover? What is this greatest discovery? This greatest discovery is probably one of the most mystifying geographic locations in the world, the Amazon, specifically the Amazon River, which also kind of gives heed to the Amazon rainforest. And we're talking about the Amazon right here. We're not talking about Jeff Bezos, ordering stuff online, getting it shipped to you. But it is kind of weird that the Amazon is the largest river in the world, so it carries water out to millions of people. And then Amazon, the company, is the largest company. I think it's becoming the largest company in the world that instead of shipping out water to everyone, it's shipping out products there. I don't know. Maybe it's just a really good name, or maybe I don't know. Maybe there's something to it. Anyways, so his main discovery would lead to the greatest paradigm shift in human history. And we're talking about when I say paradigm shift, I mean completely different way of thinking, or completely different moment that would essentially split time. I call this like struggling. I call this, me personally, I call this a timestamp moment. A timestamp moment. Because you know where you were before and after, and that's kind of a marker in your head. For me, a paradigm shifting moment in my life was 9/11. Like, I was in 6th grade. So it's probably the biggest event, or one of the biggest events of my lifetime. And it was such a it's hard to explain exactly. It was such a, I really don't know how to explain it other than just large. Like, everybody knew about it. Everybody talked about it. This whole COVID thing, like, this is kind of a timestamp moment. Like, when we look back 20 years from now, we're going to say, you're going to think about high school and you're going to say, was that pre-COVID or was that post-COVID? So it is a timestamp moment. This discovery of Amerigo Vespucci would also be a timestamp moment, along with the discoveries by Columbus. But so Vespucci would end up discovering the Amazon River. And how he did this is he actually landed off the coast of Brazil and began to make his way inland. And while he was making his way inland along with his crew, they discovered this body of water, this river. And they noticed very quickly that this river is not from a lake. Now, why is that important? Well, Vespucci had maps of Asia. Again, Asia is fairly well mapped out. Especially like bodies of water. But again, as Columbus would find out, that it's not mapped out to the T, and there are things missing in our modern maps at this point in time. But Vespucci realizes that this large body of water could not have come from a lake, and he is unaware of any rivers that would be near this perceived location, or at least this big of a river. And because of the enormity, the size of this river, he knows that this river must come from the ocean. And that's what I'm getting at. It must come from the ocean. It must begin at the mouth of the ocean and, again, progress inland to the rest of this landmass. That's how Vespucci realizes that he may be somewhere different than Columbus was originally thought to be. So the Amazon River, just by comparison's sake, and I did some research here because I wanted to give you guys like an idea of how big the Amazon River is and how large of a finding this would be for Vespucci in his, during this expedition, and why he knew that he had to be somewhere else. So the Amazon River is the largest river in the world, and it's not really that close. So in terms of volume, it is the largest river. 7,050,000 kilometers squared. Now, do I know exactly how big that is? No, I do not. But like by comparison, the largest river in Spain, which is again where Vespucci, where Columbus had set sail, was 85,000 kilometers, I should say, squared. So it is a fraction of the size of not even, it is immensely small compared to the Amazon River. The Amazon River is also the second longest river in the world, only behind the Nile River. And after kind of looking at it, the Nile River is only like 100 miles or 100 to 200 miles longer than the Amazon River. And again, the Nile River is, synonymous with life, in Africa. The Egyptian culture, a lot of major civilizations and cultures, through the days of yesteryear. But again, the longest river in Spain is 626 miles compared to 4,086 miles of the Amazon. So when I say that Amerigo Vespucci discovers the Amazon River and he knows he must be somewhere else, he obviously knows he must be somewhere else because this was not mapped out anywhere. And again, like the Asians had been keeping very good records and had been mapping out their geography for just as long as Africa, Europe. So there would not be some hidden river that was in Asia. It wouldn't be the case. Not of this size. There's no way. So due to the size of this river, again, Vespucci concludes that he must be in a different place. And what's interesting is that Vespucci and Columbus, they had maps of Asia. They both had maps of Asia. But one of the things that we typically don't think of is that they used the night sky to navigate. You've heard of the North Star. And again, how that's kind of used as a navigatory device. But they would also use the moon and the phases of the moon, the times of the year in terms of where constellations should be. So this is how they are navigating, not through GPS. I've seen people punch in an address on their phone that is 5 minutes away, that's maybe 10 miles away, and find some way to get lost on roads that have distinct markers. So we do have to at least appreciate the difficulty of these journeys and these expeditions in terms of exploration. Now, lastly, so if all this is the case, why isn't, why is Columbus such the big deal? Why do we not hear about Amerigo Vespucci? Why is Vespucci not, hailed as, the greatest discoverer of all time? It's a good question. Good question. Glad you asked. So let's take a look at our next part. Oh yeah, I forgot to put a nice little picture right here. So this is where Vespucci would depart from Spain, from Lisbon, Spain, again landing right outside of Brazil. This would be his first voyage. He goes to the islands that Columbus had spoke of. He actually travels north quite a bit. There's not much evidence. I shouldn't say much evidence. There's contradictory evidence and testimonies that Vespucci may have actually made landfall along the East Coast, where we live, but it's very shoddy at best. The second voyage would actually go to the tip of South America, which would kind of put the nail in the coffin that they were somewhere new, because again, there should not be a tip to South. There should not be a tip to the continent this far south. So they knew they must be somewhere else, because again, if this was Asia, it was entirely different than anyone had ever thought. All right, so let's continue to our next one. So I thought I had a picture on here. Maybe I did. Maybe I did. So, how did America get named after Americo? Well, Vespucci wrote letters to the Crown of Portugal and to the Italian statesman Lorenzo de' Medici. So, the Medici family being very much in charge in Italy at this time. It is through these letters that Amerigo Vespucci becomes, I wouldn't say a household name, but he becomes very popular or just throughout Europe. In his letters, he gives very detailed descriptions, yeah, of his findings, especially of the natives and their cultural practices. Again, much like Columbus, Vespucci talks about how the natives are, unclothed, how they don't seem to have like any type of like government or religious, practices. He talks about how some of them are cannibals, which may give more rise to the initial claims that Columbus had made. That he had been told by some of the other local native populations. Vespucci also describes the natives as being just kind of wild and primitive, uh, which you can kind of take for what it is. These letters would actually influence a German map maker to make a new map. His name is Martin. Excuse me, I was thinking Spanish for a second. He was German. Martin Waldseemüller. That's a pretty cool last name. I ain't gonna lie, Waldseemüller. Yeah, I like it. But he created a map. I gotta fix my hair. Created a new map of the world based on the findings of Amerigo Vespucci. Now, no one had actually called North South America. No one had actually called this area America before. They had not. They just referred to it as the New World. And this wasn't even something that Amerigo Vespucci came up with. It was actually someone, I can't remember the exact name of the guy, but it was someone during I want to say like 1496, 1497 that had actually described these places that Columbus was describing as the New World. Not that they were necessarily new places on the map, but they were, they were new in a sense. This was opening up a different part of the world. So Waldseemüller, he begins to make this new map. And this is in 1507. This is 1 year after Columbus had died. 1 year after Columbus had died. And again, word has spread that maybe this land is not named, or excuse me, maybe this land is not Asia. Maybe it is something different. So Columbus would have known this as well. He would have, Columbus definitely had these, I wouldn't say these whispers going around that maybe what he had discovered was not actually Asia. And that's a common misconception because it's easier just to throw people in these little tiny boxes. But as a year after Columbus had died, and again, people had been calling this new location the New World. But Waldseemüller, after reading these letters of Amerigo Vespucci and after having like different conversations with other map makers, he is the first to call this new landmass America. Now, how did he get America from Amerigo? Well, America is just the Latin feminized version of the name Amerigo. And, there's a lot of things that are just, they're named after, that they're named after the feminine form. Same reason that, we call, ships are named after, again, they're called, they're named after women, or they are, she. Like talking about a ship, you say she. Same thing with land. You could look at as that being part of like Mother Earth. There's also some different reasons, just based on like the tradition of societies and how women were to be protected, much like land. But that's neither here nor there. So Waldseemüller is actually the one responsible for naming America. Like Amerigo Vespucci didn't name America. That was Waldseemüller, and it was based on the findings of Amerigo Vespucci. And let's look at our last slide. So this is the map that Waldseemüller created. Now, again, we see something that is very different than what we know today. Now, Europe is, for the most part, pretty accurate. The Mediterranean Sea is not that big. There are more connected land masses here. We have Africa. Africa's pretty accurate. Again, the Mediterranean Sea is a little bit different, but again, pretty accurate. Some of the bodies of water are just a little bit bigger than they should be. Uh, we see again a collection of like islands right through the Indian Ocean that aren't there. Uh, they are that's not the case. We see that Asia and especially like this part right here with what would essentially be Australia and kind of the upper or bottom limits of China being very distorted. Again, these are the islands of the Indies. And again, this is where Columbus thinks he is. But instead, now for the first time, we are seeing some new places on our map. And this, again, you want to know why this looks like that while North America looks like that? Well, this is where the expeditions were going. This is where Columbus would explore. This is where Columbus would explore here first and then make his way to what would be South America. This is where Vespucci explored. This is where Magellan's going to explore a couple of years after this map's printed. But again, it is this map that, again, this is called America on this map. It's actually right there. You just can't see it. It's kind of small. All right. So let's look at one more because it's not quite over. So why don't we celebrate Vespucci Day? Why don't we celebrate Vespucci Day? Well, while Vespucci may have been the first to dispute the claims of the New World being part of Asia, Vespucci was still influenced by Columbus. Vespucci would have never even been an explorer if it wouldn't have been for Columbus. Again, you have to remember that it was Columbus that had essentially kind of got that ball moving, put that in motion with Vespucci and kind of convinced him through his own explorations to, go out and explore himself. Also, again, this Vespucci was not the first one in this area. It was Columbus. Now, there are debates on whether there's kind of some issues because of the dating of Vespucci's his writings, and so this has led to a lot of different controversy, including like what's called the Vespucci lie or the Vespucci myth. But there is some, I guess, it's up in the air whether Columbus was the first one to set foot in South America or whether Vespucci was the first one to set foot in South America. But even Waldseemüller tried to change the name of America after he learned that it was actually Columbus that had discovered this new world. Like there was still debate here. Like even though Columbus would have been somewhat aware that maybe he wasn't where he thought he was, this is not by any means like 100% like in the dirt like we know it. But it isn't until Waldseemüller creates this map that people begin to associate those lands that Columbus has been talking about with this same land as Vespucci. And because Waldseemüller names it America before he really quite understands exactly what Columbus had done and the fact that Columbus had been describing these same lands, he names it America and then actually tries to go back and change it. He wants to change it and to more so celebrate Columbus. But by this time, when he better understands exactly what this land is and where it is, and the history behind it all, it's 1516, and the name America had already stuck. People had been, at this point, been calling this land America for 10 years, and so he just lets it go. But it easily could have changed. Again, there is some other reasons why we don't celebrate Vespucci Day. During the 1800s, Ralph Waldo Emerson, if you have taken, I think, junior English, you may know who I'm talking about. If you take my philosophy class, we'll talk about him towards the end of our class. But he was a poet and very much a philosopher of the Transcendentalist movement. that wrote in the 1800s that he found it strange that the broad America had taken the name of a thief. Uh, Emerson was essentially just kind of giving some credence to the idea that Vespucci was just kind of a hanger owner. He actually calls him a pickle trader, that America is named after a pickle trader. And if I'm serious, like if you was to Google Vespucci pickle trader, uh, you'll find people talking about how America is named after someone that was not competent in the least. So there's a lot of different opinions surrounding Vespucci, just like a lot of our, just like a lot of people throughout history. There's a lot of differing opinions. I told you just a minute ago, because of the dating of the Vespucci letters, there are disputes that Vespucci in his original dating, it goes back to 1497 where his writings take place, but there was no possible way that he could have that there's evidence that he did not sail at least until 1499. And so because there is a big discrepancy in the dates, there are historians that believe that Vespucci himself never went on one of these expeditions. That it was actually someone in his place going on these expeditions, but Vespucci, was essentially the writer of all these letters. That he had taken the information and then wrote them and then passed them off as himself. Again, wild story, right? Wild story that there is a decent. I don't even know how to quantify it exactly, but there are historians that believe that Vespucci never set foot in the Americas, but yet all this is named after him. Again, so I can't remember exactly who it was, but one of you guys asked, "Are we going to learn anything odd about history?" It's full of oddities. All right, so. Hey, make sure you comment. I hope you guys enjoyed, and you'll have a notebook quiz tomorrow, and we'll be good to go. All right, see. All right, let me get this. Pause. There we go.